Tonight, more COVID boosters for older and vulnerable people. But a row over when testing and isolation will end, as plans are announced to lift all restrictions in England.
That is effectively saying to people, if you've got COVID, it's OK to go and potentially infect others in workplaces and settings elsewhere.
Also making the headlines, private nurseries say they're struggling to survive because the funding of free childcare is causing a staffing crisis.
The multi-million-pound bridge connecting communities in the north of Glasgow.
To sport, and Scotland's curling Golden Girls celebrate their Team GB medal success in Beijing. I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. More COVID boosters are to be offered from next month, which will target older people and the vulnerable. It comes as the Prime Minister announced the ending of isolation rules in England by the end of the week and the scrapping of universal free testing there in a few weeks' time.
But the First Minister says she doesn't agree that self-isolation and testing should end now and wants it to remain in Scotland for the moment. The question is, though, how will continued testing be paid for? With the details, here's Stephen Brown.
More than 3 million people in Scotland have now had a booster jab, and from next month, some will be offered another. Over 75s, the most vulnerable over 12s, and those in adult care homes will be given an additional booster.
The science and the development of vaccinations is changing all of the time, and that really will be the scientific efforts, community's effort to start to develop a vaccine if they can, which has much longer lasting protection. But until we have that, then I can see a cycle of top up, because we know that there is a waning effect.
In Scotland, like all parts of the UK, COVID testing has been free since the start of the pandemic. But soon in England, that's set to change. From April, they'll no longer be free, apart from for some, including older and more vulnerable people. And by the end of this week, legal requirements to isolate will end.
From this Thursday, 24th of February, we will end the legal requirement to self-isolate following a positive test. Until the 1st of April, we will still advise people who test positive to stay at home. But after that, we will encourage people with COVID-19 symptoms to exercise personal responsibility. Just as we encourage people who may have flu to be considerate to others.
Here, the rules remain the same around isolation, but the issue the Scottish Government faces is continuing the testing regime if there isn't the finance for it. This morning, the First Minister announced £80 million to help businesses recover from COVID.
I do not agree with him about the ending of self-isolation for positive cases at this point, because that is effectively saying to people, if you've got COVID, it's OK to go and potentially infect others in workplaces and settings elsewhere. I don't think that is the best way to curb the virus and aid that journey back to normality.
Angie was shielding as she's twice had a kidney transplant and is still on the highest risk list for COVID. Although she's been getting out more, she still avoids crowded places and ensures family and friends test before meeting up. Changing the rules would make her more cautious.
I understand we need to lift them because life does have to go on and people have to be able to live their lives. I think the thing that really scares me is that if people are tested positive for COVID and have COVID, they don't have to isolate now. I know they'll say, use your common sense, stay at home, but we all know people don't do that. They'll carry on going out. Although COVID might not be as dangerous now for me, it still puts me at massive risk of causing a rejection or affecting the kidney function, which for a transplant patient, that's your top priority, to keep the kidney functioning.
But would people here in Scotland like the rules to mirror England?
I'm kind of torn. I want life to go back to normal, but I do understand that there's a lot of people who still need the restrictions to be in place for their own health and safety.
It's just a bit stupid. It's because it's still a thing. It's still here, and I think if there's no rules, then it's going to go worse.
The cases are quite down, I would say, and I think they should. Hopefully soon.
The First Minister will give a further update on living with COVID in Scotland at Holyrood tomorrow. Stephen Brown, STV News.
Well, live now to our Westminster correspondent Catherine Sampson. And Catherine, a big moment for England today, but what does it mean for Scotland?
Yes, and the Prime Minister really pitched this as a moment of pride in terms of loosening these restrictions after, well, nearly 2 years in England. It certainly delighted many of his backbenchers. His opponents, though, well, he faced criticism from them that perhaps this was almost a moment of distraction too, away from stories about parties. And some said they were concerned it could put Scotland and other parts of the UK more at risk from new variants. Now, ending free testing for the general public has been far and away the most controversial part of this. The First Minister saying earlier she thought a sudden end could prove to be catastrophic. However, it's not going to be ending straight away in England, is it? It's going to be ending the 1st of April, and there are some exemptions for certain groups like the over 80s. Now, in terms of what Nicola Sturgeon may choose to do for Scotland, we'll find out tomorrow when she gives her statement. But, what matters here is the funding. Scotland, the other devolved nations, they want to know if there would be funding available if they chose to continue this longer. And that didn't seem to be the case. Ian Blackford, the SNP's Westminster leader, raised this with the Prime Minister this afternoon. Strong suggestion from Boris Johnson that if, Scotland wanted to continue free testing longer, there wouldn't be extra cash for that. They'd have to find the money from the existing COVID settlement they've been given.
And Catherine, the First Minister faces other pressures as she prepares to make her announcement tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. Pressure from many hospitality bosses about ending vaccine passports for nightclubs, bars, ending face masks for pubs. Those sorts of issues definitely are going to be looming large tomorrow. Now, throughout this pandemic, the First Minister's been keen to strike a more cautious tone than the Prime Minister. But tomorrow, probably just after 2 p.m. in Holyrood, we'll find out if the prospect of living with COVID will mean the same thing in reality in Scotland over the next few months and weeks as it does in England.
Catherine at Westminster, thank you.
Now, the expansion of free childcare in Scotland has been transformational for many families. But for private nurseries, they're warning that they're struggling to survive due to the unequal way the scheme is funded.
As costs have risen, they say funding has not. And now staff are leaving for better paying council jobs, with many private nurseries forced to close their doors. More than 200 institutions have written to the First Minister calling for her to immediately address the issue. Our political reporter Laura Alderman has the story.
It's another busy and messy playtime at this private nursery in Edinburgh. Most of the children are here for free, as their place is funded by a Scottish Government childcare scheme. But private providers say the money they receive per child is not enough to meet costs, and it's unequal to what council-run nurseries get, meaning they can't pay staff as much and are now struggling to recruit.
The difference in the hourly rate can be as much as £6 an hour. The ones that really miss out will be, at the end of the day, the children and the families, and it's really, that's the sad thing about it.
Funding for the scheme is given from the Scottish Government to councils to distribute, but private nurseries say this model is putting too much power in the hands of local authorities. It's affecting Jim's nursery in Gartcosh too. Along with 200 private nurseries, he penned a letter to the First Minister demanding equal funding.
There are 260 members of our 2020 Together group, and about 16 of them in the last 12 months have closed their doors and given up. These are small businesses that were started with people who were passionate about childcare. If we don't achieve a proper sustainable rate, we're going to have to reduce our allocation of placements for funded early learning and childcare in favour of private early learning childcare.
The flagship policy offers 1,140 hours of free childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds and some eligible 2-year-olds. That works out at around 30 hours per week during term time. But it's often the private nurseries that can offer more flexibility on when these hours are taken. And if they are struggling and potentially facing closure, ultimately it means parents and children will have fewer choices going forward.
I mean, the impact on our daily life would be massive if this had to close for us. As a parent and a business owner myself, we needed the flexibility to move around our daily lives, and having a private nursery like this so close to where we stay kind of gives us that flexibility.
Every afternoon, Monday to Friday, there's different models that you can go for, so that was my choice that worked best for me, and it's over the 50 weeks, whereas the council ones are over different kind of models, different weeks.
The issue has been raised at Holyrood too.
We're definitely heading for a staffing crisis, and this is something that the Scottish Government's been aware of for quite some time. They need to engage with the private and voluntary industry. That is an absolute must. Warm words and an exchange in a Parliament chamber just isn't going to cut it.
COSLA say councils are committed to strengthening rate-setting processes, and the Scottish Government is investing more than £1 billion into early learning and childcare this year. Private providers are hoping for talks with those in power to create a more level playing field and sustainable future for families. Laura Alderman, STV News.
By March 2024, significantly fewer people with learning disabilities or complex needs will be stuck in hospitals or living in placements far from home. That's the pledge by the Scottish Government and COSLA, and it's to be backed up by a national register and better monitoring to hold local authorities to account.
A leading charity says this deadline for change is a landmark moment, but it warns 2 years is still a long time for those affected. Here's our chief reporter, Sharon Frew.
How's Lou's house?
Earlier this month, mothers spoke to STV News of the difficulties they faced trying to get their sons out of hospital.
I feel quite powerless to protect him. I just feel as vulnerable as he does.
He wanted to come home. The last 12, 14 months, he just wanted to come home.
For Emma Finlay, progress was too slow, and Keith died after 19 months in hospital.
I just feel like if I was robbed, he was robbed.
Would you like to put this in here?
2 weeks ago, STV News filmed with Kate and her son Louis in the home he hopes to move into after more than 3 years in hospital. Finding the right care team has been an issue. The transition process so far has taken 16 months.
The intellectual understanding of why it's important has to be there. Then there has to be the determination that the funding will be there. And then there has to be putting it into practice. Louis is really resilient, and there's a lot of goodwill around Louis. And I think that helps him deal with what's been a very difficult time, which gives me hope.
A new report from the Scottish Government and COSLA, the body that represents local authorities, aims to do more to help families like Louis. It recommends a new national register of those in hospital in an unsuitable location or at risk of their support breaking down.
We will continue to monitor and to scrutinise what is going on, look to ensure that the resource that we have already allocated, £20 million, is actually being utilised to its best. And we'll listen to local authorities, to health and social care partnerships about the difficulties that they are facing.
The report states it wants to see real change by March 2024. It also recommends a network of peer support.
I think the register now basically makes people visible. I think people did get lost in the system and became completely invisible, and this register will now shine a light on every single individual and make sure that they are not forgotten about, that they are cared for, that their voices are at the heart of any decision that's made about their future placements.
That's it.
Ministers acknowledge getting this level of care right isn't an easy task. Campaigners say if the deadline is to be met, investment and support must continue. Sharon Frew, STV News.
OK, on to other stories across Scotland now. And a new 3-day music event is set to come to Edinburgh this year. The Connect Music Festival, run by the organisers of Glasgow's Transmit Festival, will be held at the Royal Highland Centre from the 26th to the 28th of August. Promoters say the line-up, which will feature a range of bands and DJs, will be announced next week.
Scottish Ballet has announced it will run a Moving Minds conference, teaming up with healthcare officials to explore the benefits therapeutic dance can have on young people's well-being. With almost 12,000 young people in Scotland waiting for an appointment with mental health services last year, it's hoped that non-medical interventions such as dance programmes could help.
Moving Minds is a 3-day immersive conference. It's happening on the 4th, 5th and 6th of May. And really it's all about exploring the positive impact of dance on young people's mental health and well-being. We've got this really exciting programme of talks, seminars, but also workshops and performances.
When I dance, I feel like it's an outlet for my emotions. Whatever I'm feeling that day, I can express it on the dance floor, and it's just a way of getting it all out there. And whether I'm happy or sad or angry or whatever emotions I'm feeling, it's a great way to express it.
And the body which regulates Scotland's crofts has been condemned as having unacceptable weakness in its leadership. A Holyrood committee says there are significant problems with the Crofting Commission, which is responsible for 20,000 crofts. The government says it's working closely with the Crofting Commission and its board to address the issues raised. Now, students are being pushed into poverty to complete their studies, with many considering dropping out because of financial pressures. That's the conclusion of a new report by the National Union of Students.
More than £5 million of support has been announced today by the Scottish Government, but as the cost of living rises, there are fears the cash will not be enough, as Sophie Wallace reports.
Haroon is a third-year student at the University of Stirling. In between lectures, he works part-time to pay for his rent and other household bills. But with costs expected to rise significantly in the next few months, he's facing some tough decisions.
I mean, it's difficult. If I work one day, I probably come home stressed. When you have financial difficulties, it impacts your mental health, etc. And you start thinking, how important is uni, if I can't provide for myself? I think engagement from students is just going to go downhill from now on if you're having to worry about more important things like actually providing for yourself to live, day to day. Like, there's a certain point where you have priorities in your life, and university for some people is an important priority. But even for those people, I think when you can't afford to put the heating on and you're freezing every single night, there becomes like a point in which you have to make those hard decisions.
Situations like Haroon's aren't unique. According to a study by the National Union of Students, nearly half are working up to 20 hours a week on top of their studies to pay for things like rent, food and gas and electricity. 2/3 say they've experienced mental health problems because they're worried about financial issues, while 1/3 have considered dropping out altogether because of money worries.
More than £5 million of support is being made available by the Scottish Government to help students who are struggling, but there are fears it won't go far enough.
The support from the Scottish Government now doesn't really touch the sides of what's necessary just now. 65% of students who applied for hardship funding either didn't receive enough money or didn't receive any money at all. So that's not the solution to this problem. What we need to see is real structural adjustments to make sure that students are supported to live comfortably.
Despite access to more funding, the rising costs of bills, which has no end in sight, means students like Haroon are still nervous about their financial future. Sophie Wallace, STV News.
A multi-million-pound bridge in Glasgow is just months away from completion. The walking and cycling link will form part of a car-free route spanning the Central Belt. Sasha Spratt has more.
Towering over the north of the city, Glasgow's skyline has a new landmark. The bridge over Stockingfield Canal Junction connects Ruckhill, Gilshire Hill to the shops and services in Maryhill.
This bridge is so important to the local community. This canal acted as a barrier, so now this bridge will connect 3 communities that allow them to move across the town and the city quite easily without using public transport or, importantly, cars.
The £13.7 million bridge is the final link in the walking and cycling network along the Lowlands Canal. Once complete, it will be possible to travel by foot from Bowling on the Clyde all the way to the centre of Edinburgh.
This single project is going to look like a wonderful, beautiful, iconic way to connect different communities in Glasgow, but it's also what went before. So this is taking what was one really, really bad connection that actually separated people and put people in a dangerous position and turning it into something that's not just functional but beautiful as well.
Builders and landscapers are now set to make the bridge a destination within its own right with art and sculptures, many made within a stone's throw of the site.
I wanted to get the idea of really capture the idea of nature reclaiming the industrial past, and also as well how actually nature and technology can work together. It really does show how the natural environment and the industrial world can work together.
Although the main works are now complete, the bridge won't be ready for the public until the end of the summer. Sasha Spratt, STV News, Glasgow.
Now it's time. Raban is here.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Good evening. Stephen Robinson has emerged as the leading candidate to become the next manager of St Mirren. The former Motherwell boss is currently in charge of English side Morecambe Town. It's our understanding the Saints board is meeting this evening to finalise their move for their preferred candidate. Hearts youth coach Stephen Naismith held talks with the Saints but withdrew himself from the running. Ange Postecoglou has praised Joris Giakoumakis after the striker scored a hat-trick to extend Celtic's lead at the top of the Premiership to 3 points. His third goal against Dundee came in the 87th minute to secure a 3-2 win for his side. Rangers dropped 2 points at Tannadice. Ross Graham gave Dundee United a first-half lead before Joe Aribo levelled with 15 minutes remaining. Great Britain's all-Scottish women's curling team have arrived back from Beijing after winning gold.
It really is just kind of surreal that this medal is just hanging around my neck. Like, it's just absolutely crazy, and it's something that I've always dreamed of, but it's something that you never know if you'll ever actually get the opportunity, even to compete at the Olympics. So to be here and to come away with the medal is absolutely amazing.
I just keep looking down at this and being like, have we done this? I just hope people get into curling like we have and like love it like we do, because it is a great sport, and I just really want people to try it, and I'm sure they'll love it as much as we do once they try it.
More now on our curler success, and Chris Harvey is at an ice rink in Forfar.
Yes, this is Forfar Indoor Sports, the curling rink where it all began for one of our gold medal winning heroes of Team Muirhead, Hayley Duff, who began her curling adventure here. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by her very proud dad, John. John, what an incredible Olympics for Hayley.
It was fantastic for the whole team. They played so solid the entire 10 days. The results were a bit up and down, but they came through, and it showed real resilience, because they were 5 and 4. They needed results to go their way, and they just stuck to the task, and the breaks did go their way, and they brought it home. And great for them. We were so pleased.
Rugby, and Scotland head coach Gregor Townsend has called up 6 players to his squad for this week's Six Nations clash with France after losing 5 to injuries. Rory Sutherland, Johnny Gray and Cameron Redpath are among the players ruled out. Kieran MacDonald, Jamie Lang, Ollie Smith, Ollie Kebble, Simon Bergen and Marshall Sykes have all been brought in.
The squad has got really good depth, and it gives an opportunity to players to show what they're about. And obviously most of the players that have come in we know, and we're excited with the squad that we have, and we're confident that we can do a job on the weekend, hopefully.
Boxing, and Josh Taylor's trainer Ben Davison believes the Scot is facing a different kind of pressure when he defends his world titles this weekend. The undisputed champion fights mandatory challenger Jack Catterall at the Hydro in Glasgow on Saturday, when he'll put all 4 belts on the line for the first time.
What Josh has been able to achieve, I always say this, he's done it in 18 fights, so of course, he's still gaining lots of experience, and how he handles these different challenges will vary, and he'll grow, and just with experience, so it's a bit of a different one because he's such a heavy favourite, and this one brings different type of pressure, but as they say, no pressure, no diamond.
And that, folks, is all your sport tonight. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sports, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Let's go to the weather now, and here's Philip.
Hello, good evening. Well, of course, overnight last night we saw Storm Franklin making its way in across the country, and it did bring with it some severely strong winds. These are some of our maximum wind strengths from last night. Isla recorded a gust of 74 miles per hour, Machrihanish 73 miles per hour, and the likes of South Uist seeing gusts of 68 miles per hour. The rest of this week, unfortunately, remaining unsettled. Let's take a closer look at what's in store. Here is the forecast.
A light drizzle is coming in from the west. TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Well, Storm Franklin has now cleared south-eastwards. Behind it, we've had a weak ridge of high pressure across the country, giving us the dry and bright conditions today, but things are going downhill for the rest of the week. Back to just now as we head through this evening and overnight. A quiet start to the night, as you can see on the map, remaining dry with some clear skies, so we could see an early frost beginning to develop. Through the second half of the night, though, things turn unsettled as these frontal systems work their way in from the west, bringing with it increasing cloud cover, increasing wind strength and also some showers. Temperature-wise, to begin with, we'll be getting close to freezing, but by the end of the night, as that cloud works its way in, getting down to around 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. So looking ahead to tomorrow, we'll see this cold front moving in after that warm front. That brings with it a more organised band of rain and also some strong gusts, possibly reaching 50 to 60 miles per hour. That moves through quite quickly through the morning. By mid-afternoon, though, we'll have a mixture of sunny spells and further blustery showers feeding in from the west. And again, some of those could be quite wintry, but mostly on higher ground. Temperature-wise, highs of 8 or 9 degrees Celsius, so on average for the time of year. Looking ahead to Wednesday, we'll see the showers picking up once again as this next frontal system moves in from the northwest. Again, some of those showers could band together to create longer spells of rain. It'll be quite windy, temperatures reaching highs of 9. Bye-bye.
TUI Blue Hotels, sponsor STV Weather.
That's all from us tonight. I'll be back with Scotland Tonight at 10:40. We'll be looking more at the COVID regulations changes in England.
And we'll be back here tomorrow at 6. But from all of us here on the team, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.
Good night.